Hello, it's Leslie Taylor here. This is the straightforward riding book and a revised, updated version of it that I'm doing now. The book was originally written by myself and Carol Brett back in 1998. The format is in that of a slideshow that you can read the text of if the text is big enough. If it isn't big enough, this audio should help so that you can hear the wording as well as read it, and you can move the video forward and back as you wish. This is chapter 3 from Straightforward Riding, and it deals with speed, tempo and impulsion. In this chapter we're going to look at the impact that speed, tempo and energy have on the horse's balance and the quality of his movement, how they combine to create beautiful balanced movement when the right quantity of each is right, or chaos and tension when one or more of these important ingredients is in conflict. You've probably all heard of this 100 times before, but what might not have been explained to you is how and why these factors work with or against you. So first let me clarify the meaning of these words in the way that I'm using them. So speed. When I say speed, I'm talking about the speed at which the horse is moving. Think about miles per hour or kilometers per hour, whichever makes sense to you. Then rhythm and tempo. What's the difference? The dictionary definition of rhythm is the regular, repeated pattern of movement, but you can have a quick rhythm or a slow rhythm. Tempo refers to the speed of the rhythm, and in music it refers to the number of beats per minute. Energy and impulsion. A dictionary definition of impulsion is forward movement or propulsion, but I'm going to use the term energy more for the purposes of this chapter. Energy as in power. So let's look at speed. The speed at which a horse is moving in any pace has a big influence on his balance and the quality of his movement, so it's a very important ingredient in your recipe for success. Whenever a horse moves at a speed that is not a good match for what he's doing, it will create problems for him. Let's think about some examples of what I'm talking about when the horse is doing a natural 2-beat diagonal trot. In a natural state, the horse will find its own natural rhythm, speed and tempo that feels most comfortable and easy, either too fast or too slow. If he wants to get to his destination quicker, he'll make a transition into an easy and comfortable canter rather than trotting too fast and to be less balanced. Unfortunately, many ridden horses are trained to trot at speeds that put them into an inefficient, unbalanced and tension-creating state. This can become their norm, and then the rider needs to spend time trying to rediscover the speed and tempo that reveals the horse's own efficient and beautiful movement again. The horrible habit of making horses trot too fast is usually done by riders who've not understood the difference between speed in miles per hour and the engagement and impulsion. So to recap, a horse that is in no great hurry will walk. If he wants to get to his destination more quickly, he won't hurry his walk in an inefficient way. He will, instead, break into a steady trot. And if he wants to get there faster still, he will break into a canter, so that he can stay within the boundaries of efficient, easy and balanced movement, rather than corrupting his balance and comfort in a disconnected and unbalanced trot or any other pace. The range of speeds that the horse stays balanced and comfortable in each pace is relatively small. However, they can, and often are, trained to tolerate being unbalanced in their natural gaits by riders when they insist on the horse trotting too fast. Too fast in miles per hour I'm talking about. And here's a horse, a good example of a horse trotting too fast for its ability to balance, and it's therefore disengaged in the hindquarters and on the forehand, and it's using the rein contact to support itself. If we can discover and respect the most efficient speed in each of his paces, we will enable him to produce the most efficient and therefore beautiful quality in the paces. It's that lovely quality of elasticity and fluidity with no apparent effort that is so pleasing to the eye. Introducing Amy and Monty, who will help us to explore these important ingredients. To help me to explain this to you, we're going to create an imaginary horse and rider for this and for other examples through these chapters. They've come to us for help, and we're going to take them through some explorations to see if we can make it easier for them to discover the direction they need to go in. The horse is called Monty, which was shortened from Montezuma, a name he was given because he tends to be a bit excitable, fast and strong. He's 16 hands, a Welsh cob crossed with something unknown, and he's 8 years old. His rider is called Amy. She's a middle-aged lady who has ridden most of her life, but apart from a few lessons through her riding club, is pretty much self-taught. She has mainly enjoyed doing trail riding and hacking and some jumping with Monty, but has recently developed an interest in dressage. She has now come to ask for help because she's getting disappointing marks and comments in the little dressage competition she's been going to, and doesn't know how to make Monty look like a dressage horse. She's been told that she has to get Monty on the bit and has tried to pull his head in like she's seen other people do, but this just ends up with them both having a miserable time. If we're going to help them, we need a starting point to explore from. So once we get started in the session, we ask Amy to move Monty into their usual trot so that we can observe them. And we ask Amy not to try to make Monty hold his head and neck in any particular way, but just to give him a positive, elastic and consistent contact that allows him to use his head and neck to balance. Being able to observe what he feels he needs to do with his head and neck when allowed to gives us valuable means of gauging what happens to Monty's balance and the quality of his movement when we ask him to try trotting at different speeds. As anticipated, they set off in a trot that is energetic and fast. Too fast for Monty to be balanced, and so he has to brace his neck up and out to stay on his feet. So we ask Amy if this is how the trot normally feels, and she says, yes, this is normal. Once they're settled into this foundation trot, we ask Amy to start to notice the various ingredients that are making up this trot and give each of them numbers as a reference. So we can start with the number for the speed in miles per hour. In my experience, riders will often choose a miles per hour number that is far lower than I would have chosen for my observation of the rate they're charging around the arena, because they've got used to trotting too fast. With our imaginary Amy and Monty, I might, for instance, have chosen a number like 15. But I have to remember that it's important that I accept the number that makes sense to Amy and not insist that she uses mine. It doesn't actually matter what number she says, it's just a starting point. She can't actually get it wrong. So let's imagine that Amy comes up with the number 12 miles per hour. We ask her to scan around and notice how good the rein contact feels at this speed, how consistent, how heavy, how equal, etc., and how straight is his neck. Is Monty holding his head to the outside, or can he keep it straight in front of his withers at this 12 miles an hour speed? And is the speed consistent around corners and on the straight, or is Monty wanting to slow down on the corners? It's so valuable to get the rider to pay attention to the feel she's getting, as they're providing all valuable information about the state and quality of the balance and movement of the horse at any given moment. So we ask Amy to describe all of these things that she notices out loud. Now that we've established Monty and Amy's normal working trot, we can start to explore what happens when we make small changes to the speed. For example, I can ask Amy to see if she can show me what a 10-mile-an-hour trot looks like. We might need to remind her that as soon as she has given Monty a slow down signal from the reins and he has obliged, she must quickly return to giving him a positive, elastic, equal feel to reward his response. We'll ask Amy to shout out when she thinks she has achieved a 10-mile-an-hour trot, and then ask her to scan around for the feels of the rein contact as we did before. From the ground we can observe the quality of the trot, the amount of suspension, the way that Monty is moving his joints, the outline, and we can also listen to how he's landing on the ground. The better balanced and efficient, the quieter his footfalls will be. And now we can ask Amy the same questions. Do you like it better or not? What do you like about it? Let's assume that she likes it better and that Monty is more consistent in the reins, feels more elastic, is straighter in his neck, etc. So now we can suggest that she gets brave and tries slowing to 8 miles an hour and see how that feels. If it's better, that's great. If it's not so good, then Amy can experiment with the speed and fine-tune the best one for this stage of Monty's training. Using this simple method of altering the speed by 1 or 2 miles an hour at a time, and notice how the speed changes many things in the trot. Sadly, it's common practice to ride horses too fast in a misguided attempt to create the feeling of energy and impulsion. So in many cases, riders find that when they slow the trot in miles per hour, the horses are able to give softer, rounder strides. Very occasionally, you'll find the best feels by increasing the speed 1 mile an hour at a time. So let's imagine that Monty and Amy have experimented and discovered the best feeling trot of speed for today. So here's a little useful example of what I'm describing, and this is Kate riding her horse Zonda, and this is what Kate on the day described as her 6 mile an hour trot, and you can see the resulting organisation in Zonda's body. So he's rather flat, he's not very engaged, in fact his hindquarters are fairly disengaged. You can see that in the shape of his the joints in his hind legs. And his neck is a little extended forward and his head and neck is fairly low, and that's all basically just a response to that the way he's having to use his body at that speed of trot. And in this image, which is taken literally 1 or 2 minutes after the previous one, you can see something's changed in the way Zonda's got his body organised. So a little bit more articulation in his joints, the hock joint, and his lifting his knee slightly. The head and neck outline has changed a little, and he's not quite as much on his forehand. And the only difference between the 2 photographs is that Kate has actually helped him to slow the speed in miles per hour. And as such a key ingredient in our mix of things that makes a good trot, this shows just a little example of how much of a difference it can make. And it's worth just saying that the head and neck outline is far better in this image, and this isn't something that Kate's had to manufacture or persuade the horse to do. It's simply a reorganisation of his whole balance and his body. And that's why having the ability in the rider to return between actually giving an aid to this positive but passive rein contact, I think we talked about in the first chapter about peaceful contact, it's so important, because that's what's actually revealing the truth of how the horse's body is organised and balanced. Anybody can fiddle a horse's head and neck into an outline and pretend that it's correct, but actually when the head and neck outline happens and is achieved through the whole organisation of the entire body, then it's always correct. So now let's look at the tempo. So we found the best quality of working trot that Monty can produce today, and having done that, we can turn our attention to another ingredient in the recipe for a good trot. We need to see how rhythmic the steps are and how fast the steps are being made. Remember, the speed of the rhythm is what tempo means. The trot pace is made up of 2 beats with a moment of suspension in between. The legs are picked up and put down in diagonal pairs. Identifying and working with each horse's own natural and comfortable tempo is an essential part of correct training the young or inexperienced horse. Working with a natural tempo creates the most effortless, fluent and beautiful movement. However, making a horse work at a tempo that is out of sync with its balance and coordination will create effort, tension, stress and ugly movement. For the most part, when talking about tempo, we will focus on the tempo of the steps of the hind legs to keep things simple. We'll stick with using the trot to explore this, and we can ask Amy to take her attention to Monty's hind feet so that she can feel and sometimes hear the regularity and tempo of when his hind feet are hitting the ground. Instructors can help riders to learn this by calling out left, right, in time with the footfalls to allow the rider to identify the feel, and then they can take over saying left, right, etc. Some riders really benefit from using an electronic metronome as they ride, set to sound out a tempo. Amy is quick to pick this up and notices that Monty's tempo doesn't stay the same all the way around the arena. Every time he comes to a corner, it slows down and speeds up on the straight sides. This is very common and often goes unnoticed by the rider. So I ask Amy to see if she can encourage Monty to keep his tempo through the corners the same as along the straight lines. She has to give a few leg aids to stop him from slowing his hind legs, and his first response is to go faster in miles per hour, which is not what she wants. So she has to politely correct that, so the ingredients of speed in miles per hour and the speed of the rhythm are a much better match. After a couple of corners with Monty looking a bit puzzled, he begins to understand and can maintain the same speed and tempo around the whole arena. Amy is pleased that having achieved this, Monty feels very nice in the reins and is more responsive. In our next session together, we establish the same routine and see if we can help Monty to find the lovely balanced trot from last time, paying attention to the speed and experimenting and fine-tuning until we find the best one possible today, and don't assume it will be exactly the same as last time. Once we have the right speed in miles per hour, we look at the tempo again and whether it can be maintained on circles, half circles of different sizes, in straight lines and in both directions. It's interesting to note that once the rider is aware of the tempo and is capable of helping their horse to maintain it through different simple movements, it is amazing how something that sounds so simple can improve the quality of the trot in over 90% of horses. Now that Amy can identify and help Monty to maintain his speed and the regularity of his trot tempo, she has another ingredient that she can use to help to train Monty to become more athletic and better balanced, and to help him learn to lengthen or collect himself when carrying the unnatural weight of a rider in a very simple, easy and straightforward way. Remember, when making a Victoria sponge cake, we have to make sure we use the right quantity of each ingredient to work together. Too much or too little of anything spoils the whole thing, and this relates to riding too. And the last ingredient we're going to look at in this chapter is energy, or impulsion as it's often called in riding. So in this session with Amy and Monty, we look at the third ingredient of our recipe for a great quality trot, and I'm talking about energy, or in horsey speak, impulsion. If you look up the word impulsion in a thesaurus, other words for impulsion include motion, force, drive, thrust and push. Once again, we need to create a starting point that we can use as a comparison when we ask Amy and Monty to explore what happens when they have more or less energy in their best trot speed in miles per hour and tempo. They find a very nice trot quite quickly, and so we now ask Amy to describe the amount of energy in that trot with a number between 0 and 10. Once again, the number doesn't really need to relate to anything other than how it feels to Amy. And in this good working trot, the amount of energy might feel fairly neutral, like a 5 for example. So what do you think will happen if Amy asks Monty to increase his energy levels to a 6? She'll need to ask for more power, which in most situations will be done with a stimulating leg aid. Now, very commonly, this increase in energy gets translated by the horse straight into a faster speed and or a quicker tempo. In terms of the quality of the trot, which is our focus, Monty runs forward into a faster trot than he can balance at, and the quality of the trot is reduced. So Amy will have to settle him back into the speed and tempo that he feels best in, and understandably, Monty reduces the amount of energy he's putting into the trot. Now she'll try again, but this time when she asks for more energy, she does not agree with him getting faster in his miles per hour or his tempo. She doesn't allow herself to speed up in the up-down of her rising, in other words posting trot, but stays at the same tempo as she had before. This obviously requires that the rider has control over their movement, which is important for anyone who wants to ride well. Monty notices that Amy does not feel as easy to carry when he speeds up, and she's also using a slow down aid through the reins. And as soon as his speed is back in sync with Amy, he feels the relief of everything feeling easier and more comfortable. This creates the incentive for him to stay in sync with his rider. Amy starts to practice encouraging Monty to be a bit more energetic in his trot by using her lower legs to create a clear go aid. She has to remember to stop saying go as soon as Monty responds and return to a positively passive leg position, which is her way of rewarding him for his effort. Remember that she's not allowing him to just increase in his speed and is not agreeing with his speeding up at his tempo either. So now they're trotting with a different combination of ingredients, and the outcome will be different too. In this case, by asking Monty to put more energy into his trot while maintaining the same speed and tempo, the effect is that it helps him to be more balanced and connected between his hindquarters and forequarters. Amy notices that he's become more consistent and equal in the rein contact, and that his whole outline has become more engaged than she's used to, and he's a bit more lifted in his neck. She also realises that Monty can get around corners and cope with a 12-metre size circle easily and keep the quality of the trot, the contact, his balance, and feels like he has more enthusiasm too. When they've got the hang of this quality of trot so that it's become the new default working trot, it opens the door to introducing collection in an easy, progressive and logical way. And we'll see how we can use this awareness of speed to create really good downward transitions, but that's the next thing we'll look at in the next chapter.